This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Monday morning. It's October 28th, and we got the first week of the Wolves season in the books. 2-1. They lose in the opener in LA, a win in Sacramento, and then another win in the home opener on Saturday against Toronto. We got Jace, Frederick, who hasn't been on in season yet. So we kind of, we can get into themes from that whole last week, maybe focus on the Toronto game a little bit, because that's the one game we haven't done a pod since. But happy Monday, Jace. How we doing?
Excellent, man. If you hear any noises, they're excavating across the street from my house. So
I have a similar situation going outside.
Yeah. So apologies about that. Really nothing we can do about it.
No.
And then I guess PSA, if you just are here for the can't miss has never literally ever lost Monday night Prize Picks parlay, that is at the end of the show.
Yes. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. And when I sent Jace the outline, that was the only part he was excited.
I was like, hey, we're 1-0. You better put some time and effort into this.
Hey, it was a 4-leg, right? So we did $5 to win 50, and we hit that. So now we have the rest of the regular season paid for every Monday for the rest of the year.
55, but
we do 5.
Kind of planning on winning them all.
Yeah, well,
for the listener.
This is all for the listener. We have the clutch gene. How do you like that segue?
There you go.
Like
so
Rudy
clever.
Gobert. Yeah. So I think it was with the Toronto game last night, and for everyone who watched it, 2 nights ago. Sorry. Who watched it? It was pretty clear that Rudy Gobert, he put that game away, right? In the way that he did very many times last season, by just doing sort of more Rudy stuff at the end of the game. It's probably like one of my favorite Rudy things that I've picked up on since covering him and watching every game. I'm sure he did it in Utah, but it's fun to see here in Minnesota, and I think it's good that he had that game. A couple of days after he signs this big extension, and you're kind of like, oh yeah, Rudy is not only a high end role player, he also has the ability to sort of turn up to another level in winning time. And I know we've talked about this a bunch, just like at games, kind of our appreciation for that in Rudy's game has grown. How would you describe that on Saturday night, 2 nights ago's game?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing, and Chris Finch said this after the game, is like, we don't basically, like, Rudy's the reason why we don't lose games like this. Like Toronto, like, things are fading, slipping a little bit, like it's getting a little out of whack, it's getting a little weird. Minnesota has no mojo at this point. Like they just kind of kicked the game around for a while, and then it was like, oh wait, how do we get this back? Because then the answer is usually not, like, somebody's not just going to go like hit a big shot out of no offense when no rhythm is occurring. But Rudy's stuff is so bankable, totally. And it can happen. And that is the thing that can just happen on a switch, like, it's not like, okay, now we're just going to play great offense when you haven't played great offense for 5 minutes, but Rudy can crash the glass. Like, Rudy can defend the rim. Like, these are all things that he can do. And when he puts his mind to it, like, okay, now I need to really do it here. Like, if Rudy decided on a possession, like, I need to grab an offensive rebound, he's probably going to go get it, like his stuff is super bankable, and it creates such a high floor for this team. And like, it is kind of cool to see, like, you don't want to go for every single offensive rebound. I know sometimes he says like, oh yeah, I want to get them all, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But he knows when it's time to, things like that.
That was the end of that game. I mean,
exactly. I mean, he knows what to do and when to do it. Like, it's the IQ, it's reading situations, it's everything. And so when you have his skills that he knows that he can bring at any given time, and he can decipher, he's really good at deciphering when to do what. Like, that's a weapon.
Yeah, and I think as part of this team is still young, and I think it's actually just kind of like a normal thing, not a great attribute, but like a kind of normal attribute around the league, is like, you get up by 20 and you take your foot off the gas. And I think we've seen Ant do that periodically throughout his career. I think he kind of did that on Saturday night, and that 20-point lead is down to like 7 with 2 minutes left in the game. And I think it was Randall was at the free throw line, and Rudy went and got that offensive rebound, kicks it out, another shot, he gets another offensive rebound, and you're just kind of like, okay, Rudy saving that. Then on the other end, Scotty Barnes drives down into him, he blocks it. It's like game over. you know, and they were going to probably win. It was still 7 minutes or 7-point lead with 2 minutes left.
I never felt like they're going to lose. Yeah.
But he's done that in closer games. I think the first time I really remember it was last year in that Golden State sort of back to back. Just you know, some of his switching stuff or closing out to the corner and getting a block. It's just dialing it up a degree. I asked Rudy about it in the locker room after the game. He kind of jokingly called it the clutch gene, but I don't know. I kind of think it is. Here's Rudy.
Couple bad stretches right before that, so I try to just do what I do, you know, and do it at the highest level when we need it the most, and you know.
You do it more at those times, though, right?
Like, sure,
or like switching on defense or whatever. It's kind of
called being clutch. It's a clutch gene. But yeah, I mean, when it's you know, when it's dark, like you say, when it's dark, you gotta try to bring the light, you know, and instead of looking around, you know, being mad at myself, being mad at whoever, you know, just trying to make winning plays, and I think that's what. You know, I think that's a way of impacting winning.
That like seems like a joke, but that's real. That's won the Wolves a lot of games. I guess that's just the simplest way to put it. It's won a lot of games for the Wolves in the now 2+ seasons that Rudy's been here. It's such a unique thing though around the league, man. Like, who else are we like? Yeah, man, they got clutch gene of getting offensive rebounds, like setting good screens. Like, who else?
But that's the whole thing, though, is you don't know, right? Like, because you didn't know Rudy did that before. So unless you watch the team every night, you don't know. There might be teams that do that, you know, like the Knicks might be like Josh Hart, you know, like I mean, stuff like that. Like they exist, but you have to pay
maybe that's the point is that you get
right.
appreciation for it when you're watching.
You have to be laser focused in on it to like a team or whatever, a player to notice it. And that's what's so cool about it is so many guys the guys who do it are doing it largely without the recognition. Like on a night to night basis, like if you watch one game, you might be like, hey, that guy was actually huge, but you wouldn't know just looking at the box score every night. They do that every night. That is who they are. Like they bring it. I couldn't help when I listened to that quote live sitting there. And he's like, when the start bring the light, I'm just like, darkness retreat. Like, that's just what put into my mind. Like when he's giving an answer and I'm like, I agree. But like, is this a darkness retreat reference? It's not, but
I mean, it's his mentality. That's he was the poet,
it was a good quote.
And then he was listening to Zach Bryan in there, and after the game, Rudy's a unique cat, but I do think it's these things that where my appreciation for him has grown, probably because I watch him every night now, and I certainly wasn't doing that when he was playing in Utah. You've noted this on Twitter a few times and in your articles. It does seem like Rudy's doing a couple things a little bit more, though, a little bit new. I put that to you in the outline. We've both picked up on Rudy looking a lot better on the role as a passer, which against Toronto in the way that they were kind of guarding him, they're just playing in a drop. We got a lot of Rudy lobs for dunks, but Sacramento was right there blitzing Sabonis the whole time. So Rudy's job as the screener is to be more of a short roll option there for Ant when Ant's on those little like rocket dribble passes to him on the short roll. Rudy's catching them. He's taking like a controlled dribble and finding a kick out on the opposite side. And that, it never looks like the cleanest thing. It doesn't look like Draymond on the short roll or whatever. It's not necessarily quick, but it's effective. And I think back to that Denver series, man, and they just ignored him there. They played up and they ignored him in that short roll area. He's always been ignored at that 8-foot zone. Obviously, I talked about wanting him to have those little push shots from 8 foot. You got to be able to do something when you catch it on the short roll if you're going to be a screener. And what it's looking like is he's going to be a passer out of that. And given how it seems like they want to play, like that plays into the flow. I've been really impressed by that in the first 3 games and even preseason.
It's pretty critical, I think, when you want to run a fair amount of pick and roll, which they've done a little more of, and that takes advantage of Rudy's strengths as a screener. It's an easy way to let Anthony Edwards operate. It's critical to have somebody who's good at that because there will be a lot of teams that blitz it. Like, remember when the Wolves played the high wall in 21-22 season, and I just remember they would like high wall against Booker, And DeAndre Ayton just killed him out of the short roll. And it so often was like he scored when it's there, and when they crashed down, then kicked to a corner shooter. You remember the West Finals, the Wolves were blitzing Luka, and Derek Lively was just incredible out of that short roll, just like kicking to corner shooters. And it looks so simple when you do it right. The biggest challenge is just like realizing that you have time. Like with Rudy, if you get the ball, and I think he's realizing this year, it's because you have a ton of space. That is when you're going to get the ball, and like you can take a dribble. You can survey the defense. Nothing has to be rushed. So often in the past, he was like, okay, I'm rolling to the rim. I got the ball and I got to put one up here. And it would just be like a wild shot that didn't hit the rim. And he'd be like, can't do that. Now he just seems so much more like in control of like, take a dribble. Okay, now is somebody in front of me? Like, if so, then that means somebody's open in that corner over there. Right. And I'll just make the pass to him. Simple play. If they're not, if they didn't suck all the way in, if the low man isn't in the right spot, if the low man's really small and I can just dunk on him, like
finish it,
do that. You know, it's just, it's simple. It's going slow. It's just not allowing yourself to get sped up, because when you speed yourself up, this is true for any big man, you can look silly. But he just really, like he said, he's worked on it a lot. It looks like it. And I just think like so many of these best offenses, especially when you have a guard that you want to run pick and roll with, you do have like a good short roll guy who can operate and make a defense pay for blitzing, pay for high wall, whatever. And Rudy looks like that. It's not what you would think just looking at the roster. It's not what you would think when looking at Rudy Gobert, but these first few games, it's looked pretty dang good.
Yeah. And it's necessary that he's able to nail that read progression. I mean, it's kind of like, it reminds me of like a quarterback in football, like a rookie quarterback in football, and you're watching them the first 5 or 6 weeks and they're getting flustered in the pocket or doing this, they're choosing to tuck it and run it too often. And then you get a handful of weeks into the season or a year or two into their career, and there's just like a greater comfort knowing that, like, yes, the blitz is coming, but like I do have another second there. And that's just Rudy's whole game, I think, on both sides of the ball in these first 3 games is just, it hasn't been frenetic. It's been like very calm and a little bit different. Like he's going through a change here too. Julius Randle next to him is different than Karl Anthony Towns was next to him. And I think on the defensive side of the ball, we're noticing that too, because he always has to guard the center. He didn't have to do that with Cat. Sometimes they strategically did it. And a season ago, he got cooked by Sabonis. You know, he got hurt by Anthony Davis sometimes. Even another big body like Pirtle could sometimes impact them.
Anybody can score in the 8 to 10 foot range was always kind of it.
Yeah, and Pirtle's got that little shot right there. Yeah. I think he blocked one of them.
Yeah, I did too. He was much more aggressive in that area.
There was, Rudy's 32 now too. And again, you're thinking about this stuff with some of the contract extension of like, remember when we were sitting there in Denver 2 years ago and we were looking at Rudy and you were like, man, look at DeAndre Jordan over here.
No, I didn't say that.
I mean, I agreed with it, but like it's a fair thing. Most 7-footers, once they hit 30, start having like a slow and kind of precipitous drop off from their effectiveness. Jordan would be an example of that. He stayed in the league. But to me, and at least for right now, Rudy at 32 actually looks better than he did at 30, his first year when he was on this Wolves team. And that's a super important stabilizer with this group.
We're not saying like he's like the most skilled big man ever, but he's getting more skilled and picking up more things while not yet losing any athleticism. And that is kind of where he looks like the outlier compared to some of these guys. Like DeAndre Jordan just didn't look like the same, like when you don't put as much into maintaining your physique and just like where you are at your athleticism, that stuff's going to start to wane. Like Rudy, you can just tell this guy like is fully uncommitted to being the best version of himself, athlete, whatever. Like it's very clear that guy is in phenomenal conditioning. And so that is going to decelerate any, downfall in his game. Like he really, like, as long as he keeps up that, like I think it's going to be hard to notice year over year for at least a while. Father Time eventually will win, but he is definitely doing a really good job keeping up his end of the battle right now.
For sure. And this new extension, is going to take him to 35. It's 33, 34, 35.
35 was a player option.
Yeah, 35 is a player option there. So I guess 33, 34, and I don't.
If he can play well enough to where he declines that player option, that would be incredible in his end. I'm not gonna bet against him at this point. But
no, and even then, I think that one's good. Year's gonna be like 39. 3 years from now, 39 is probably what we think of as like 29 now or something like that. It's not. They're also not.
If it does just keep going up and up and up.
Yes, you're right. If the cap keeps going up, but we got to talk to Finch finally about the extension because it was finalized, and I thought it was cool to hear Finch talk about it because it kind of is a full circle of Mike Conley signing an extension early, not testing the market. Rudy signing an extension early, not testing the market. Maybe sacrificing some upside in what they could earn. Just to sort of lock in the number, which ultimately helps the team. I think Finch is a part of that in kind of the way, just I guess part of the culture here and part of the way he's coached them through this. I thought this was an interesting answer from Finch on the Rudy extension. I'll play that. Chris, I remember with one of your first groups, you talked about your job as a coach is obviously to coach, but also to put these players in position to earn in their careers in the league. And kind of along those lines, I'm curious of what your involvement is in the process with Rudy getting the extension or Mike and kind of the way they've somewhat strategically done it to enhance themselves, but also the team.
Yeah, listen, we tell these guys on day one, this is really only about two things. It's about winning basketball games and helping them increase their value in the marketplace. That's what it is. And the second one is helped by the first one, no doubt about it. And what we don't take for granted, but certainly do appreciate, is when they recognize in the marketplace that while there might be some other opportunities that may pay them a little bit more, that they want to be somewhere where they like and somewhere where they believe they can win. So it's a little bit of a kind of a full circle moment. But we're always pleased to be able to take care of our guys who've helped us.
Yeah, Jace, we haven't talked about this. Just sort of curious your perspective on how this has come together. Again, it's been a couple of links of the chain kind of connecting with Conley doing that, his extension at the end of the season, Rudy doing this now. I think you only really get to fold in cap numbers at the number you like or that is advantageous for you as a team if you have a culture of winning and a group of guys who want to come in. If this is a team that's expected to win 41 games versus 52 or whatever, you maybe don't get that same sort of buy-in from players who are willing to give something up, in the name of winning. And I just think that's really noticeable. It's a very, I think, foreign thing for the Minnesota Timberwolves, but is very much happening now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the Mike Conley contract, when we first looked at it, we were like, wow, what a steal. And then I saw Tyus Jones go for the minimum and I was like, oh, maybe that was really smart of Mike just to lock in something.
Sure. Because, yeah, I guess it does go both ways.
The marketplace in general is crowded. But for a guy like Rudy, you would still expect he could get pretty high end value because he is still all-star, all-NBA type talent,
Sure.
And those guys teams move things around or whatever, and they'll bend over backwards to acquire that type of talent. Rudy's deal, I thought, made a ton of sense just in terms of I totally understand getting that long-term security.
Sure.
But you're right. You don't want to lock in long-term security at a place where you don't want to be, because then you're not going to prioritize that. But when you like where you're at, then you are willing to be hey, yeah, I think it's nice to just be secure financially and just be secure. And then I know where I am and I like where I am and I want to kind of keep this thing rolling. So I agree, the Wolves have a great facility. They all speak very highly about the coaching staff, and the front office and all these things. And so there's a bunch of check marks, in Minnesota's favor of hey, if it comes down to here or there and maybe it's a little bit less here or whatever, maybe you'll pick the Wolves. Or if it's not exactly the number you want for an extension, but that it kind of locks you in at a place where you like to be, maybe you're willing to sacrifice 5-10 million, whatever. So it does matter. And it's something you do hear about in other spots and hadn't really seen it here. But especially at a place like Minnesota where, hey, it's going to have to be guys who are here, who recognize the value in it, because it's probably not something that's going to happen in free agency. Somebody being I had one phone conversation with Tim Connolly. I bet they do have a great culture there, and I'm going to take less money to go there. Like, right. I don't think you're going to get a bunch of cheap, like, wow, they just really wanted to be here free agent deals. But I like extensions, guys who do see like the culture and whatnot that you have. Like, that's where that value is really going to strike.
Well, it's just interesting how like the league is moving to extensions versus playing off of getting cap space to go sign guys.
Just no way to get the cap space anymore.
Yeah.
Like it's extension. You have to keep your own guys. We've seen that. Like
that is roster building 101 in the modern NBA. Whereas 10 years ago, and I think this actually is advantageous for smaller markets or less glamour markets, where 10 years ago, like the Wolves could have 30 million in cap space. You got to convince somebody to come to Minnesota.
That led to swinging and missing, striking out, and then paying somebody who should never make that much money because you're like, well, we have it. Let's get somebody.
Exactly. No, I think it's the way this is structured now, and as much as it stinks that the Wolves are at such a high total salary number when like the teeth of the second apron are kind of coming in like to actually hurt teams. There is a counter positive balance, to this in that how teams are being built is from within, and that's probably the best way for this Wolves group to win. And Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert, and we'll keep seeing what happens with Naz Reid and Julius Randle if they can kind of keep parlaying all this stuff together to just be as economically sound as you can in this cap environment. Thus far, they're clearly doing a really good job of that. Let's go our first break. Let you all know that today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino. And I'm excited to announce that I am going to be doing a live show at Treasure Island on Friday night, November 15th. And the best part of this live event is that there's a game that night. A lot of the times when we do live shows, it's kind of like on and off night. We do the show and then everybody kind of goes their separate way. Well, what we're going to do for this one is do the live show before the game. It's on the 15th. They play in Sacramento that night. So it's a 9 p.m. local tip time. So kind of make a night out of it. Come down to Treasure Island. Kyle's going to be flying into town for it. Kind of do like a happy hour at 7 p.m. while we're sort of setting up. Then at 8, Kyle and I will do the live show. Then the game obviously tips off at 9 p.m. Should be fun against the Kings. We'll keep bugging you about details for that. But in case you do want to make like a weekend or a night out of it, wanted to put this on your schedule that it's November 15th, 9 p.m. tip at Treasure Island Resort Casino. Come early, 8 p.m. For the live show. For more information, visit ticasino.com for those details. Today's show is also brought to you by Adriana Lonick at Coldwell Banker Realty. And if you are in a place right now where you are considering buying or selling a home, we would love it if you considered Adriana and just had that first free consultation about what this looks like for you. If you'd like to get information on contacting Adriana, setting up one of those free consultations, you can go to thedancingrealtor.com. It's in the show notes, or you can call or text her at 715-304-9920. Just book that free strategy session. And when you do book a free strategy session, you are entered to win some free tickets. If you're in the market for buying or selling a home, please consider Adriana at thedancingrealtor.com or at 715-304-9920. All right, Jace, let's keep moving here with I want to talk about the starting lineup and the bench too, and just kind of how this is all coming
together.
The whole team. Yeah, right. Well, yes, we'll talk about the whole team, but how this all kind of stitches together, right? We were curious to see, the decision to have Randle in the starting lineup versus Reid, which was never, I think, that much of a decision, but
right.
It's the way they went, and the starting five is going to be the starting five, and I think there's certainly been ups and downs to the starting lineup. The beginning of the game against Toronto was really good with the starting group, but it's been, I think they have an exactly even plus minus at this point with those five guys on the floor, bolstered a little bit by the Toronto game. How is just that? We'll start there with the starting five before we get to kind of the bench guys individually. How are you feeling about how the starting five is functioning?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be okay, but I look at that lineup and it kind of looks the way that I think it would. Like, I don't think there's enough, there's not really ball movers enough, I don't think, and there's not enough shooting. So I just don't know if I don't know if that's ever going to be like their premier five, and that is kind of an odd thing to say about your starting lineup. But it just doesn't look natural, and I don't know if it ever will. Like, I just think that they have so many pieces that fit together, and guys within that starting five fit together really well, and fit in really well with reserves. Like, they're all five really good players. It's just like, if you are creating the perfect five out of like the 8 or 9 guys they have, this wouldn't be the 5 you'd pick, but they are the 5 guys that, like, you just look by what they've done in the past, who they've been, their accolades, just generally their roles in the NBA. They're the 5 starters. So it's a really fine line to walk. What's been interesting to me is that the Wolves have also kind of tried to make them the closing lineup too. Only really changing, I think, when it's been obvious that can't be the case. Like, in Sacramento, eventually they had to be like, well, we've got to get DiVincenzo in here because we need a little bit more shooting for a minute or two. And so I think it's going to be an interesting line to walk, because, I mean, I think they can succeed. They can certainly play decent basketball. I just don't think it'll ever be like, this is the lineup that's maximizing their chance to win right now.
Right. It was, I went back and rewatched the beginning of that game, because when you and I were talking about it, and Chris, I think in the media room after the game, and I think you said, you're like, well, the beginning of the game was really good from that group. And I was kind of like, I feel like they're really figuring out. Going back and rewatching the beginning of the game, it was really good. And I think it was just like as simple as whoever it was, Ant, Julius, whatever, once that initial like attack was taken away, Ant's got that gap help there. It was kind of like dribble, and then quickly off of it, and then that next guy scored,
Right.
And same thing with Randall. Okay, the second guy comes, one more dribble, kicked him Conley in the corner, he's open for it. When they quickly get through that progression of like, all right, I'm looking for my shot isn't there because of the way the defense is guarding me, one pass away, then that guy goes. That's clean. That's been clean.
That's the best version of the offense with Ant on the floor, generally speaking.
Exactly. And that's pretty much what we're talking about here, that version of Ant on the floor, but that is exacerbated when it's Ant on the floor with Julius on the floor, because they're just going to be more the quote unquote ball stoppers in this thing. It is encouraging to see. It's just good for them to get reps or, 6-7 minute stretches of time when they're doing that and rolling. Like, they started the game up 17-5, and that's when the Wolves bench guys started coming, and they killed it in that opening stretch. The question is just like, when do those things become more so habits? And we don't go, ooh, that was a good 6-minute stretch. We go, that was another good 6-minute stretch from the starting 5. And that's like many things with this team. Just how long is it going to take for it all to sink in? But yeah, I do think Ant's a big part of it.
I will say, like, I think just for 30 games in, I think it's really impressive where Julius Randle is at in terms of kind of like starting to fit into some degree. Certainly, like, just the shot making in Sacramento was insane, but I just really like the way he played against Toronto. I thought like the off-ball cutting, that like the exact times, getting to the right spots, making himself just an available target for somebody who's like driving or whatever, just for like an easy dump off for a bucket, was it really impressive. I thought he's also been like decently just like ready on catch and shoots, like he certainly looks like a capable catch and shoot player, because he's just ready to fire when the opportunity comes. And like, so I think in a couple of ways, it's like, okay, this guy can fit next to more people than I thought, if he continues to play this kind of basketball. And I think him kind of seemingly, I think, fitting better and better every game, and we're just 3 games into the season, is a very positive thing for Minnesota. So like that for me, the way that he is playing, the way that he is kind of fitting alongside while still being like his aggressive self, is the greatest hope, I think, for the starting lineup kind of working it out.
What do you think about the Ant element of this in particular, and specifically how he's clearly changed his shot diet? For many, years, the first handful of years in the league, it was, all right, that's a lot of mid-range Ant, and I think it was all the first 3 years of his career, he shot a higher percentage from 3-point range than he did from the mid-range. So it seemed it was like, all right, don't let go of the mid-range completely, but let's adjust it into a little bit more at the rim or from 3. And it got there. Like last year, it started moving, in that, or it's kind of slowly moved in that progression over the course of his career. It's just interesting where we're at right now. And it's only 3 games in, but I was looking at cleaning the glass, and he has 72 field goal attempts, including field goal attempts that he got fouled on. And of those 72, only 11 have came at the rim so far. 11 field goal attempts, got fouled there twice. He's had 11 from that floater range, 10 field goal attempts. One time got fouled there. 9 mid-range attempts, which I think at least 2 or 3 of those are threes that he had his foot on the line. I think that's happened a couple times.
Don't forget the 6 crossover air ball.
That was one of the 9 mid-range shots as well. But of the 72 shots, Jace, 39 of them have been 3-point attempts thus far, and it's just different. And I think that's part of the acclimation process to this starting lineup. Is it's like, oh, that's kind of a different player. It's a different version of Ant. And again, overall, a better version in terms of shot selection, than what he was 2 or 3 years ago. But I think it's just an adjustment to have him go to the basket so much less than he historically has, where he just had on that his kind of the way he's changed his shot selection, because he's shooting like twice as many threes relative. Shot about 30% of his threes. 30% of his shots last year were threes. This year it's 54%. So
yeah, I do want to know. I don't think that has anything to do with like, and you even said this either, that it has anything to do with like playing next to Randall or anything. I just think that's just how he's
choosing it. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Yeah. I mean, it feels a little heavy. It does, just because like at some point, a big part of his gravity is his ability to get to the rim. So like if that becomes like kind of part of the game plan, then like he won't probably have the same gravity, I don't think. In terms of like how he is sucking in the defense, there won't be as much gap help. The reads won't be as easy. All these types of things. I'm not surprised that he's doing it, because I think he works so much on that shot that, like we've said in the past, like he likes to show off the things that he's working on. And like the 3-point volume, it's just like, we're going to see this across the league. Like Minnesota took 53s against Sacramento. Chicago took 53s against the other night in their game. Like teams that you would not think do it are doing it. And Minnesota clearly has placed an emphasis on like, let's shoot more threes. Yeah. And Ant, if anything, is like, okay, yeah. Like, and I very much thought like playing with Dante DiVincenzo and seeing that trigger was going to lead to Ant having a faster trigger as well. And so far it has. Both guys are like, I have an inch, I'm going to take it. And I think that's not going to end up being the worst thing for Minnesota. But I do think like, and I'm not even really worried about it at this point in the season. I just think that's the beginning. And I think eventually it's going to come down naturally and like level out a little bit. And I think he's going to get to a pretty good spot. I really do. Like that is not something that I would be concerned about watching the Wolves as being like, Ant's taking too many threes. Sure, he is right now, but I do think it's like an emphasis thing. And then it'll come back to like where maybe like a level water that you like.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, the water will level to some extent there. It does fuel the team to be shooting a lot more threes when, and then part of that is, replacing like some of Cat is being replaced by DiVincenzo. Well, DiVincenzo is a higher volume 3-point shooter than him. Some of Cat is being replaced by Naz Reid. Naz Reid is a higher volume 3-point shooter.
Julius looks like one right now, honestly.
Yeah. And they were about, and even last year, Randall and Cat shot the same amount of threes per game. So we are really noticing. And I think like the best stat I have for it is the Wolves have shot more threes than twos this year. They only did that in one game last season. Like it is a significant shift. And Ant is the main fuel of that. I think the DiVincenzo, the Reed and Randall parts of it are something there too. But I mean, it's shot 39 threes. That's a lot of threes, in 3 games. So it'll be interesting. Yeah. What the process is of getting back to like the comfortable water level. Cause I think it's probably a little bit lower than it is now, which is still be significantly higher than last season. And
the best threes are still drive and kick to some degree, and they maybe not even like direct drive and kick. It's drive, kick, and now like move it a couple times. Yeah. But those are still the best ones. Certainly Minnesota has some actions that just get guys like flare screens, whatever, like, and they're getting looks off and stuff like that. But the best will always, I think, just be drive and kick. But and it's still this team's best driver by about a mile. Yeah. So that is where you'd like to see him attack a little bit more. But like I said, like I don't think it's a huge concern, and like he is a good shooter. So like, if he shoots what is considered too high of a volume, like it's not that detrimental to your team.
Yeah, and it's way better than too high of a volume on contested mid-range shots.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is like, hey, games on the line against Sacramento. Eventually, he did get to the rim.
Yep,
like at least be aggressive when it's time to, and he certainly recognized there like it was time to. So that's what matters most, I think. In the last 5 minutes, that is when you need to be the most like intentional about attacking and putting pressure on the defense.
Right. I think to whatever degree the starting five is figuring out its chemistry, the bench guys, at least individually, have really presented themselves as weapons. The weapons that we anticipated them being. It looks like the best bench in the NBA by far. Which was the hope. I mean, that was part of the bet on the cat for DiVincenzo, as DiVincenzo come back in the trade. Nas is a weapon. DiVincenzo is a weapon. Nickeil has been an awesome weapon in these first 3 games after a rough preseason. And then Ingles has been in the mix there too. I guess just of any of those 3 guys, who stood out to you or has this surprised you at all? And if so, what has stood out?
Hasn't surprised me at all. I just think like they're going to play Denver this week. And I can't imagine like Nikola Jokic like looking out there like the start of the second quarter or whatever and be like, what the bleep is this? Like that is their bench. Like that's their second unit. Like those types of things. Like this is like not even close to a fair fight. And it's not, frankly, like I think like I have no surprise that Dante and Nas fit in next to anybody and like play fluidly off one another. And like just the way they play the game, like it just seems obvious that you can they can mix and match any lineup. Yeah. It's just the fact that Nickeil has played as well as he has, like totally makes it where like it is a strong 8. And I think in the preseason there were probably concerns of like, I don't know, like Nickeil didn't finish on the best note in that Dallas series, and like it wasn't the most impressive Olympics, and now the preseason was a kind of a struggle. And you're like, okay, like I don't know, is he going to hold on to that spot? Like how committed are they to him? And like, and he's just been great, and he's played like Nickeil Alexander-Walker from last season. And that is like now you have 8 really good players, and the 3 guys off the bench are so smart and fluid, and their games like they're malleable to fit alongside kind of anybody, and they all play with such confidence that like they're 3 starter level players. They just are, obviously. Like 3 like pretty good starter level players where they probably wouldn't be the worst guy in the starting lineup on hardly any team outside.
Well, we were talking about that a couple weeks ago. It's like, what if DiVincenzo would have been a free agent this summer?
Yeah, huge deal. What if Nas was a free agent? Huge, probably. At probably like $20 million a year. Like
both of them. Yeah, $20 million a year. Like, and then Nickeil too. Like,
at worst a mid level, but I think he should be higher than that. But teams don't watch, so probably mid level.
That's. But again, starter level money. I think for all of those guys, or will be making it on their next contract when they get there. It's such a weapon. I think for me, Nickeil is the one that's just been awesome to see. I kind of, as I thought more about the trade and that, the first days after it, I was like, ooh, like DiVincenzo and Nickeil kind of play the same position. Like if somebody's hurt by this trade, it's going to be Nickeil. And then, like you said, the preseason happens as it did. I think it's been so encouraging to see how great. I mean, he's the best net rating on the team through 3 games, 7 from 10 from 3. I mean, he's killing it. He looks like what he was a season ago, and to do that within the context of a new lineup is really meaningful. I thought this was a awesome answer from Finch on Nickeil before the game on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I love Nickeil. I mean, I've got a long relationship with him. Was there when he was drafted. I saw his struggles firsthand. He was in a place where when you tried to help him, like he just wouldn't listen because he was so fixated on doing certain things and playing the game a certain way. I really believe that the turning point came when he met Mike Conley in Utah, and Mike was able to kind of unwire him and get him to calm down. And with Nickeil, it's like, he's a very intelligent. He's extremely worldly. He has a tendency to overthink, and when he overthinks things, he gets hard on himself. So a lot of the honesty that we have is just getting back to basics and keeping it, reminding him just how he has been so successful for us. I think I'll give you just a perfect example. Like he came into this season thinking like, okay, we have a void at point guard. This is what my team needs me to do, and I'm going to set out to do it. And through the preseason, that was his primary focus. And we just said, that's fine. We appreciate that. We have a lot of guys who can play point guard right now. You got to get back to doing what you do best, which is being like, an offensive initiator, but getting off the ball and making shots. So it's no coincidence his shot is going in at the moment and it didn't go in the preseason, because he's just kind of unfettered his mind from having to think about how to set up everybody, which is not really natural to his game. So he's smart. As soon as you have that conversation, it clicks. But a few years ago, it wouldn't. He would fight you because he just wanted it so bad.
Perfect answer. No notes. That's great.
What's so funny about Nikhil is he might be the easiest person to read, just like watching play basketball. Yeah. Like, you watch him and you're like, he's thinking too much right now. Like we said in the preseason, he's trying to be point guard too much right now. Like you could watch him play and you're like, he's trying to be point guard and he's not comfortable with it. Yeah, right. And you can like watching the Dallas series and be like, this guy's confident. He's just overthinking the entire game. Like, like his shots aren't going in. And when he's playing like his brand of basketball, like you can tell like within a 3-minute shift and be like, yep, Nikhil's in a good spot tonight. Just by like how he looks, how freely he looks like he's playing the game, how confidently he looks like he's playing the game. Like, very easy to read. But my favorite thing about Nikhil is, like Finch talked about there, like now he'll take lessons. Like, he also is constantly like trying to learn from his failures too. And so I think he is open to being like, yeah, I am doing that, being introspective, being like, I am trying too hard to do this. How do I go about fixing that? How do I free my mind up now as I head into the regular season? Like, it's a good combination. It's really cool to see, like, because it's so easy to read him, it's cool to see like his own internal battle like play out on the court, like,
yeah, man.
He's a fascinating player to watch.
And fun, man. Yeah. Like I said this to Britt the other day. It's like it's the guy that, you've caught a few of their games on League Pass. You're like, oh, this dude, like put him into, like, you get this guy into a starting lineup on his next team, like it's that classic, because he is nailing what his job is on this team, and now has for the entirety of his time being here. And even when that came into question with what happened with the Dallas series, with what happened with Dante DiVincenzo, who's kind of a combo guard too, playing his position, coming in and finding a way to be good around that. Just, the type of dude that you want on your team. I think that's been super encouraging. Let's move over to DiVincenzo a little bit. He hasn't, like, if you just look at kind of his numbers in the aggregate right now, I would say he's played really well yet. Toronto game was good. He definitely got back on track. He was hitting threes. It's just easy to see how he fits into this thing. And I'm right. Or are we doing too much? Are we giving him too much? Like, yeah, this is going to be totally fine. We saw it in the preseason. It's all going to happen. We've really only seen one game of it, thus far.
Yeah, I would say like the shot is not falling right now. And so that's probably part of the thing where it just doesn't look quite as good, but like, yet still the spacing, you see like that the spacing matters. And you see that like his ability to play off the catch and drive. And then when somebody collapses at the rim, like he like drops off to Randall or somebody else for a bucket, or like drives and kicks. Like, it just, to me, like, even when he's not scoring, even when the shots aren't falling, like you just see like, oh, he's playing basketball the right way. And it just makes the offense look so much more fluid. It's the same thing with Nas. Even with Nas goes like 0 for 6 from 3, I'm like, but he's making the right decisions every single time down the court. He's doing it in a quick manner. And so the offense, even if they're not scoring, it still looks good. Like, and sometimes shots aren't going to fall. And that's the way that I kind of thought about DiVincenzo here too. Like, as he is also navigating, like we talked about with Randall, but it's like, oh, DiVincenzo, don't worry about him. He can play next to anybody. He's still getting used to everybody else. Sure. Still getting used to like, okay, when can I kind of think I'm going to get the ball on this cut, or as I stand here, like this guy's driving, do I think I'm going to get the ball here? Like, to be ready to catch and shoot on this spot. He's taking a lot of movement threes. So those aren't the easiest looks either. And it's probably something you get more used to as well. Like I think he's been good. I certainly don't think it's been like great just because the shot making hasn't been there yet. Sometimes there've been a couple turnovers as well where I'm like, probably wasn't, maybe a little bit out of control or whatever. And defensively, like I think if he does end up having to guard like the other team's, one of their better players, it'll be tough for him for sure. But on this team, like that should only be the case so often. So I think he looks like a really good fit. I think his best basketball, like I would expect a few games where it's like, wow, this guy is shooting the lights out and got to 25 points or whatever. Like,
Yeah, I just think with all four of them,
he's finally getting to play with Mike Conley too, just this last game. Which those two are like a match made in heaven, and I found it baffling that they weren't playing together to start.
Right. Well, and I think that's part of a figuring it out thing too, from a coaching standpoint of like, changing it from we want to get to this to we have to get to this, and it seemed like we kind of hit a turning point of like Conley and DiVincenzo have to play together, even though. The easiest thing to do is just have DiVincenzo come in for Mike as backup point guard. So that's part of figuring this all out too. I just think why I'm so encouraged with the bench group in general is I think all four of the guys, even Ingles, know exactly what their job is.
Right.
And they're doing, and the Toronto game was like a perfect example of it. Nas checks into the game and he gets one of those like classic right away, quick release threes. It was from the corner. Jaden found him. He missed it, but it was like, yep, that's what Nas does right when he checks into the game. DiVincenzo had like a little interchange action, just found his pull up and hit it on the right break for his first shot. Nikhil had that charge right away where he's just like, he runs back on defense. So he's one pass away, but he's playing off of, I think it was Jamal Shed, not really a shooter. So he's just like in the gap and he gets a charge from the gap. Like that's just rare. Like you need to be so on point of what your position is and taking a charge. It's like, Nikhil checked into the game, was in perfect defensive position, took a charge, boom. And then even Ingles, like his first possession, I guess the very first possession, he got that offensive rebound, kind of handed it off to Rudy, who finished it. And then the very next possession down the floor, he found Rudy on that lob. It's like, all four of those guys get the assignment. And I think the starting lineup still figured out what their assignment is. It just really helps when I think 6 through 9 know what they need to be doing right now.
I really think like now that you have Mike and Ingles out there, like, and they both like look for easy opportunities and make it look easy to get Rudy the ball. Like, I mean, like Finch joked about it, like it's year 3, we better be better at like lobs and chemistry and stuff. But so much of it, I think, has just been spurred by the people they've added, and like you just see the way that Rudy like looks more like a weapon offensively with these guys out there, and it looks so simple that I think it does kind of spark. And Nikhil is somebody who's probably just learned how to do that as well when he hit Rudy on it. But like it's a lot of people who just understand the game, understand their role, understand their job, like, and when they enter the game, and like it's almost like if it's going well, it'll be seamless transition into it, and if it's not going well, like it just doesn't feel like it's it's bound to carry over, like I really do feel like this is a bench unit that can shift bad energy and keep going good stuff. Like they don't need to just be a continuation of like, oh man, the starters were bad, and now like these guys like, I don't, this is gonna change. It's almost like an entirely different game because they play offense differently. Like I just think first 5-man unit.
Their best lineup right now, I don't know what it is, but it's not the starting 5. So
you
know what I'm saying? Like just right now, just getting to
the starting line, the best lineup has to have Nas in it. Nas has like the best net rating or whatever by a lot.
And so just those groups are finding it. The best groups know what the assignment is right now, and I think the starting lineup will get there. We've talked about that. It's a more complicated assignment, but
what do you think? I just bring this back to the starting lineup, but when they are really rolling, what do you think it will look like? Like what do you think like offensively? What will a good stretch of possessions look like for them? What will they have gotten to?
It's that beginning of that game, and again, like inside baseball a little bit or whatever, but like when we were doing the post-game press conference, like you asked the question right before I did, and you asked Finch about, it looks like the starting lineup is figuring itself out. And what I was going to ask was like, looks like the starting lineup is still figuring itself out. And
that was true in the fourth. You were right. And like the fourth quarter, that was not good for them. And they kind of fell back into exactly what they'd been before. But
where I was wrong is how good the start of that game was. And I just, whatever, it's the chaos of the beginning of the game. And, and maybe I discredited it some because it was Toronto and whatever. But it popped rewatching that game. And if anybody just at home, you just turn on the first literally 6 minutes of that game, and it's that 0.5 mentality, and nobody really tried to force anything through. They like understood when their individual attack value sort of weared off and got it to the next guy, and then the next guy didn't hold. Like if it gets like that, where it's not the primary initiator isn't dragging out their first decision, and then the secondary guy is acting quickly, like that's what this looks like, just from like an energy standpoint of how they're playing. I think we're still learning, like specifically how much flow versus set plays. I think it's been beneficial to the early offense of this group, particularly that group, that they're calling more set plays, some more designed actions. I think is just guiding some of Randall or Ant away from bogging it down.
Right.
It requires the players to make quick decisions, and I think it just requires Finch to be intentional about what positions he's putting those guys in. So yeah, that it happened at the beginning of the game. So I can't say it's a concern or it's a hypothetical of what it's going to look like. It looks like that. It looks like the beginning of that game.
Yeah, and I don't want to I never push the even concern button, frankly, on anything this early in the season. Unless it's wow, these guys there's no energy out here. They're just getting run off the floor. Like that was the case. The first few games of after the Rudy trade, it was they're just not even trying to get back in transition. That's not just something that's super fixable, and I don't think it really ever did that whole season. They never became a great team or anything close to it. But it is it's a little bit with this group, when it's the start of the game, you do a little bit of thought of okay, they were doing probably what was super emphasized, hey, we need to do this. You 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 come out of the gates, you're we need to do this. Right. And then you get in the fourth quarter and you can say hey, it's Toronto and you have a lead or something, but it hasn't been the emphasis for a while. And that lineup gets back out there and it's fall back into what you do, that's the only, I think, concern is it is hard to make your habits, to make what you do, your habits,
for all 48.
The thing that's being emphasized and not what you've always kind of been. I think I still am a little bit of the Ant Julius pairing. They can be super dangerous offensively. They've been productive alongside one another. Mm-hmm. But it is sometimes hard to see for the offense, Julius, when he's out there without Ant, and they're playing with rhythm and flow. I think that's when Julius looks like his absolute best of this is natural basketball. And I would never even call Julius a ball holder right now. But sometimes I think we will get into some your turn, my turn stuff from Ant and Julius, which will probably be a little bit frustrating. Yeah. Some nights they'll just go off and each score 35. So it'll be whatever.
I think what'll be interesting is the test of this week where you're playing against more potent offenses. So
one of them.
Yeah, right. We'll see. Dallas on Tuesday, Denver on Thursday. Well, let's talk about Dallas. Dallas has a high floor to their offense. When Luka plays, and we'll see. It's a back-to-back for Dallas. We'll see.
Oh yeah, they play tonight, correct?
Yeah, I think so. So they're just and to Sacramento's credit too. Sacramento's a good offensive team. The Wolves just kept pace with that really good offense because Julius got hot, late in the first quarter and in the second quarter and had 22 at halftime or whatever. I think sometimes what's going to be required for this group is, while they're still figuring it out, someone just getting hot to keep pace with a team like Dallas, who knows exactly what they're doing, trying to get to the same things over and over. Dallas is a push the button team, right? This is what's working here. We're going to push it until they do something to that's just Luka's game, And so I'm curious to see them against Dallas, who is a team who has made some changes to it. I only watched their opening night game, but even with Clay and you had Najee Marshall and stuff like that, it feels like the same Dallas team where they basically just replaced the guy who's in the corner, spaced around the Luka pick and roll. So you're going to get a Dallas team that knows exactly how they want to play. And I'm curious to see how this Wolves team, who's figuring out how they want to play against them. Doesn't mean that they're underdogs or anything there. Those are just two different, I think, comfort levels that they come into this game with. And the Wolves, when they get out of comfort, they just need to sort of go to Ant or Julius. Come on, take over here. That's what it feels like to me right now.
Yeah, and what'll be interesting about that one is and it's the second half of a back-to-back, so this probably will not be you can only put so much into it. But Dallas is at least usually a better defensive game plan team, actually comes up with one. Yeah. Or a lot of teams don't. So they might be hey, this is how we can defend that starting lineup to make it bog it down easily, whatever. So that'll be interesting just to see. And then obviously hey, if it gets into clutch time and you're going up against Luka and Kyrie, and now Minnesota's clutch time offense, what did they do? Does it turn into isolation basketball? That'll be an interesting game from a lot of different perspectives. obviously, I think this early in the year would probably happen, but you just hope that Kyrie and Luka both play in it so you can see the whole thing. Who knows? I know it's a national TV game. And tonight I just looked it up. They play Utah. Like they might be able to win that game in 3 quarters. And I'd have to assume that matters to some degree.
Yeah, I'm just excited to see them against more of a test and maybe more of a defensive test.
Because you're right. Like even like early in the year, like you can say Sacramento's good. Like nobody expects that team to win.
But they didn't have a matchup for Ant and Randall.
I mean, nobody even expects them to win 45 games, you know? So like, it's not like a great team by any stretch.
But you get what I'm saying from a defensive, to your point, the defensive game plan standpoint. Like Sacramento didn't have a defensive game plan they could go to because they didn't have personnel to match up against both Ant and Randall.
It's just like how Minnesota used to not have somebody to guard Randall. Like the Kings didn't have somebody to guard Randall. Yeah.
Which maybe we're going to learn over the course of the years. Maybe fewer teams have that.
Right.
And when we think, or maybe the teams that do have that guy, like, I don't know, like the Pelicans with Zion or Milwaukee with Giannis, they don't have an Ant on those teams that they have to,
which is true.
You know, like, so you can just put your best defender, provided they're big enough, you know, to guard a 4, you can put them on there. I think that's what's going to be just something to navigate here. And I think Dallas has, off the top of my head, you know, certainly more personnel to be able to do that than Toronto did, and more than Sacramento did. I mean, Sacramento had DeRozan on Randall. Like that's not it. Like, and I think the Wolves should be able to hurt every one of those teams, and they did. And Randall hurt that in the Sacramento game. So I'm curious to see that part of the Dallas game. But I think the biggest thing for Dallas is, man, they broke the Wolves defense last year in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like the way that Luka picked it apart. They found ways to expose Conley, who was hurt, but just that sort of double drag action that they ran over and over again. And the Wolves are like a slap the floor and guard you one-on-one team with Rudy behind them. They're not like a great navigating this off-ball screen. Okay, here's a flare, here's that. Like they're very like
the detail,
right? You know, they're like very forward-looking defensively. And against Dallas, it's more about awareness. Just like, where could Luka go with this thing, or here comes Gafford, here comes Lively. We haven't said this yet, but like the defense is pretty clearly worse than it was. The Wolves defense is not going to be as good as it was last season. I think the offense is pretty clearly going to be better. But if you had the best defense in the league last year and you struggled with Dallas significantly in the playoffs, Tuesday should be a good test for this defense, and specifically this new defensive personnel who maybe does have, you added DiVincenzo. You got some more perimeter guys who can guard a Kyrie and a Luka and maybe slow that down more than last season's group could. But I think that's the biggest thing I'm looking forward to in the Dallas game.
Yeah, and then like, can you score along with them? Like Finch said in the playoffs last year, like you got to be able to score along with these teams sometimes. Minnesota couldn't do that in the past. Can they do it now? Like they scored alongside Sacramento. Sacramento's a little different test. Sacramento, I don't think it's going to stop anybody this year. But can you score alongside Dallas if Luka is going up for 40 on shots where you're like, oh my God, like where Kyrie is hitting some really tough shots in route to 30 points, like, and you're like, wow, defended this pretty well. Can you score alongside of them? I think this team is probably better equipped to do that. And this will be like a good test to see if that is indeed the case.
I think they're going to have to score alongside Denver too, man. And I know Denver looks toxic right now, but
hideous.
But I mean, Rudy, I know, but just from a matching up standpoint, you're putting the game plan together. Like,
okay, I mean,
Rudy has to guard Jokic.
Yeah, I mean, Jokic scored like 40 some points the other game, and everyone else looks terrible. I mean, like terrible.
And the Wolves will win if that holds.
Yeah,
but if the Wolves have to bring doubles consistently on Rudy one-on-one with Jokic, like he's gonna pick that apart. To some extent, I would assume the Wolves, or what I would say is like play the passing lanes for cuts off of that more and try and make them beat you from 3. But Denver could do that too. It's like they could have a good shooting game, and that's different, and that's why Denver's a lower team now.
Yeah, that's where you're at now. Like that's with any team. It's like Team B could shoot the ball well tonight.
Right, and that's the difference. Like Denver before, you were like, all right, there's the one hiding spot of Gordon here, but now just in the starting lineup, it's Brown and it's Gordon, and it's pretty much everybody who comes off the bench too, where, even if they're playing well, it's kind of like when the Wolves played Giddey last season.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, we're going to let that one go.
Right. And he might make his first 3, but guess what? Over the course of the game, law of averages play out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I need to, I haven't watched a full Denver game. I've just watched like some pieces here and there, but obviously it's bad.
Sometimes the preseason is indicative. Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
It's not always. Teams can flip a switch or whatever, but you watch Denver, even watch Minnesota, where I think like they were probably trying to take away positive things of like Jamal Murray got going, you know, the offense looked a little better. But if you were there watching, you were like, I don't think this looks very good at all. Especially not against the Wolves 11 through 15. And that was their only win of the preseason, and it has carried forward. They have looked not good. And so like, yeah, I don't know. Like maybe they'll flip a switch. You know, maybe they will win a game. Anybody can win a game, you know, like at any point. But this does not look like a good team right now.
No, and I think what you're saying is, Dane, distinguish between Dallas and Denver right now.
Yes, correct. Yes, Dallas is like legitimate. Like that should be really interesting. Denver can beat anybody. Sure, they could come in and beat Minnesota, but like it's not like that win where you'd be like, wow, they just beat Denver, Western Conference contender. Like that does not look like the case right now.
Have you looked at the schedule like after this week?
No, and I didn't even do it after you sent the doc, and I was like, "Oh, interesting." And it's like Dane will say what it is.
I didn't write them all down, but I'm gonna do it. So it's like, okay, so you got Dallas Tuesday night, and a back-to-back. So the Wolves will be favored to win that game. They'll be favored against Denver on Thursday. You know, it's a home game there too. So we're talking about there's a good chance, but it shakes out by the end of this week that they're 4-1.
Right.
And the schedule is easy for a stretch. Spurs at Spurs, home for but generally speaking, in terms of this league that is loaded right now, this is an easy stretch. At Spurs, home Hornets, at Bulls, home Blazers, home
at
Heat.
Bulls,
at Bulls.
Yeah.
Hang on.
They do not win in Chicago. I have this interesting stat. No, just because I have to say it. You can go ahead and keep talking. You can keep going through the schedule.
So at Bulls, I'm going to start over. At Spurs, home Hornets, at Bulls, home Blazers, home Heat, at Blazers, at Blazers. That's pretty easy. Yeah. I mean, I know we don't know like the league all that well yet, but
got some idea. Yeah.
For a, what is that? 7 game stretch there. 3 of them are against the Blazers. 1 is against the Hornets. 1's against the Bulls and 1's against the Spurs. The best team you're playing is the Heat.
Yeah, I would say. I think the worst time to play really bad teams is early in the year, when they're not beaten down yet. You know, and there's still some belief and like trying to, you know.
I'm not saying they're going to be 11-1 after that.
No, I agree with you though that the opportunity like you would certainly bet on 9-3, you know, like 8-4, like if they said, I agree. Like it's set up for a strong start. I agree. This is my Bulls stat because I looked it up after the preseason game where the Bulls just hit a ton of threes, because I felt like they always did.
Yeah,
counting that game,
the preseason game.
Yeah, well, it fits in. Chicago from 3 against Chris Finch coached Minnesota Timberwolves teams, 123 for 277 from deep. 44.4% from 3-point range. The Bulls against Chris Finch. That's 9 games. The worst they've ever shot in any of those games was 39.5%.
I remember last year in Chicago, Kobe White. That game. Yeah.
Every game. 44.4% in 9 games. One team versus another team. And the Wolves have been very good defensively.
Yeah, no, that's tough.
So in Chicago, that's an L.
So that's okay. So that's what I'm there. I don't want to get too far ahead of like the schedule and everything, but
it probably won't come up again. So I wanted to spit it.
Right. Well, I don't. They only play the Bulls one other time. It should be. That's why I just think it would be nice to, if they can, kind of roll through this homestand here, at least pick up one of them. You know, they're in a good spot to get to the 10 game mark of the season, 10-12 game mark of the season, feeling really good about where they're at in the acclimation period of all this. So just want to note that.
And if you want to get like a 1 seed in the West, which I mean, I assume is probably one of their goals, you know, like I know they're not like favored to do so, but Hey, like if you talk about title aspirations, then like if you talk about like a West Finals against like an OKC, you'd probably like to have home court in that. Like all these types of things, like every game does matter over 82 games in respect to those types of things.
And the Wolves are a team that is going to treat it that way because Finch treats it that way.
Correct.
And organizationally, load management, blah, 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 all that stuff. Like they have always been way more on the Tibbs side of the spectrum than they have been the like Kawhi side of the spectrum of all this stuff. Like, yeah, they're gonna push to win. I don't think it will be interesting to see if and when they start resting people, because I think Finch will do that a little bit more than he has in the past. But let's do our prize pick segment here, Jace. Every Tuesday or every Monday, sorry. Jason and I pick a prize picks lineup. You just you choose more or less on 2 to 6 statistics on a player for a given game, or you can mix NFL and NBA. We on Mondays pick them for the Monday Night Football game. What do you got? You want to go back and forth?
Yeah, we can go back and forth.
Feel a lot of pressure here because
I know. Well, who are you 2 players? I
got Devin Singletary and Wan'Dale Robinson. So I need you to do a Steelers guy.
Okay, I have one Steelers guy and one Giants.
Because you do need to have, you can't do all one team. Yep. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so I'll go with my Steelers one, and it's Russell Wilson under 15.5 rushing yards.
I saw that one too. I like that. All right.
Yeah, we're a team here. He just doesn't really approach that number anymore. It's just like every year he gets farther and farther away from being that guy. And I think the Steelers are going to win. So you always get the kneel down -1, -2 at the end.
I'll do Singletary. He played last week. He was really, really the running back. Obviously, they're mixing in Tyrone Tracy here some, but 41.5 rushing plus receiving yards is a really low number for like a primary back. Like you look on the screen here, like Jalen Warren, his number is 47.5, and he's obviously like the second RB there. I know the Giants aren't as good as the Steelers, but I like Devin Singletary to go for more than 41.5 rushing plus receiving yards. What else?
I'm going to take Daniel Jones over 25.5 rushing yards.
Oh, we're doing the QB rushing yards game.
We are.
You want to amplify it here? Oh, no, we can't. No, they don't even have that.
No, I won't take that one. I'll go over the 25.5. It's
okay.
TJ Watt rushing, you've seen it. Like it's like 10 yards outside the line of scrimmage. So like if he gets there and some lanes open up pretty quickly.
And Jones can run.
Jones runs for 30 yards pretty regularly. So I think.
Well, we learned our lesson on Bo Nix last Thursday when we were more so watching Thursday Night Football than we were that last.
I was like, "What'd you take today, Dane?" He's like, "I took Bo Nix under rushing." And like 3 minutes into the game, I'm looking at the box score and I'm like,
"He literally had
Bo Nix just
he literally rushed for like 25 yards on the first possession of the game." It's wrong. So that's how I'm doing the Jace. I'm doing mores here. I got my other one is receptions. Wan'Dale Robinson more than 4.5 receptions, which is not on the board.
Doesn't count.
Well, okay. Well, can do this with me. What do you like? Should we do Neighbors more than 6.5 receptions? I don't know.
I feel like under on somebody.
Well, I didn't really have a lot of time to to prepare something else here. What was another one you had?
I didn't have any other ones.
I thought you said Okay.
Well, do you think Wan'Dale gets at 36.5 receiving yards or no? That's a tough one. Okay.
I liked 4.5 receptions more, but
I agree. But yeah, okay. Sounds good. We're actually picking an offensive explosion for the Giants.
No, it's 41.5 rushing total yards for Singletary, 25.5 rushing yards for Daniel Jones, 36.5 receiving yards for Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't know. I like that. And Wilson less than 15.5. So again, how this works for prize picks, if you want to submit a 4-player lineup like this, if you just were to do $5 on it and all 4 of those hit, as it did for Jason and I last Monday, or I guess that was 2 Mondays ago when we were last on, you get 10 to 1 on your money there, and so that $5 would turn into 50.
Okay.
Yeah, what do you got?
Wan'Dale is probably like, if it pops back up, is 4.5 your official pick?
If it pops back up, yes, but I don't see it on here.
Okay, well, I'm gonna check at like 6 o'clock, and if it's up there,
then you'll send it to me. All right,
that'll be our official pick for everything. So just don't place it for a while.
All right, deal. If you do not have a Prize Picks account, and you want to try it out, it's you can use the promo code Dane, and when you submit your first $5 lineup, if you want to do this one, they will instantly credit your account with $50, and then when this certainly wins, you will get.
It's never not one on Monday night. It's never not one. So
It's just fun. I mean, I don't like literally with me and Jace when we are like sitting at Target Center, like, oh, what do you got for this game or that game? It's a fun little extra.
What do you have for football that I'm going to put on my monitor?
Yeah, right. Well, that was a rough final preseason game, so we needed something to keep other than Luka Garza going for 30 or whatever. Yeah, so this is that's PrizePicks. Again, prizepicks.com, PrizePicks app. Use the promo code Dane for that free $50 when you submit your first $5 lineup. You got anything else, Jace? Did we miss anything?
No.
I think that's it. We're 3 games in, 2-1. A new test, a different test, probably a better test with this Dallas game. We'll see what they end up doing tonight against Utah. And like Jay said, I would like Luka and Kyrie and everybody to play in that game. Maybe even Clay too. Like, is he going to play a back-to-back?
Right.
But that's what's coming up next. And the next show will be after that game. So no show on Tuesday morning. Chris and I will talk about the Wolves Mavs game on Wednesday morning. Yeah. Until then, you follow Jace on Twitter at Jace Frederick. You're reading him over at the Pioneer Press. Yeah. Thanks for doing it, Jace.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Until Wednesday with Chris, he's Jace. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.